Ethan Cole stood at the small grocery store checkout counter, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of rain outside mixed with the faint hum of the refrigerator behind him. The store lights were dim and tired, just like him. It was late in the evening, and only a few people were there. He looked down at the box of diapers on the counter, the cheaper brand that he hoped would last for a week. His hands trembled as he opened his thin brown wallet. Inside was a single crumpled dollar and a few coins that barely made a sound when they hit the counter. He whispered the numbers to himself, hoping the total would somehow change this time. It did not. The price on the register glowed red, showing him what he already knew. He did not have enough. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, gave him a polite smile and told him softly that he was short. Ethan's throat felt tight. He gave a small nod, his face warm with quiet shame. He did not want to look back at the line behind him. He could feel eyes on him. He could feel the weight of his own helplessness pressing hard against his ribs. Ethan had been running between 2 part-time jobs since his wife passed away. It had been 8 months since the accident, and every day since then felt like running with a broken leg. His daughter, Lily, was only a baby. She had soft brown curls and eyes that made him remember everything good. But Lily cried often these days because her father could not always give her what she needed when she needed it. Tonight was one of those nights. She had 1 diaper left, and Ethan had been counting the hours since the morning. He told himself that if he could just make this one small purchase, they would be all right till payday. Behind him stood a woman wearing a long gray coat. Her presence was steady and calm. Her name was Claire Donovan, though no one in the grocery store knew who she was. To most people, she was just another stranger waiting to pay for her groceries. But in her world outside these flickering lights, she was a well-known name. She was a successful CEO who managed hundreds of employees, owned offices in tall glass buildings, and earned more money in a week than most people did in a year. Yet none of that mattered at this moment. She had come in quietly to buy a few things on her way home from yet another long evening of meetings that left her feeling hollow inside. She noticed the man in front of her long before he noticed her. She saw the weariness in his shoulders, the way his clothes looked faded but clean, and the way he counted his coins as if every one meant a breath of air. She had seen that kind of desperation before on faces of employees struggling to pay rent, on tired parents waiting for buses at midnight. But something about this man made her chest ache in a way she could not explain. His eyes carried both fear and kindness. He had no anger, no frustration, only quiet defeat. The cashier told him again that the money was not enough. He whispered something under his breath and reached to pull the box away. The little pack of diapers slid across the counter toward him, and as he drew it back into his arms, his hand brushed against the thin fabric of the woman's gray coat sleeve. He froze for a brief second, embarrassed. He muttered an apology without lifting his eyes. Before Ethan could turn to leave, a gentle voice spoke behind him, clear and certain. The sound of it seemed to cut through the soft hum of the store. The woman said she would pay. He turned his head slightly, confused. She met his uncertain gaze with a calm firmness that surprised him. There was no pity in her tone, just a simple assurance, as if the matter were already settled. The cashier blinked, unsure what to do. The woman gave her a small nod, then placed her groceries on the counter beside his. The machine beeped, and the sound felt strangely loud. Ethan tried to protest. He said she did not have to do that. But she smiled faintly and said it was all right. Her smile was warm, yet her eyes carried sadness. It was the kind of sadness that comes when life gives you everything except what truly matters. Outside, the rain continued to fall. The woman handed Ethan the small box of diapers with both hands. He hesitated before taking it, feeling a rush of confusion and gratitude he could not find the right words for. He could only manage a quiet thank you. She just said, "Take care of your little one." Then she turned and walked out into the night, her gray coat catching the light for a brief moment before disappearing into the drizzle. Ethan stood by the door, watching as she crossed the parking lot. Something about that moment stayed with him. He could not explain it, but deep in his chest, beneath the weight of his tired heart, something small and bright began to stir again, something he had nearly forgotten how to feel. It was hope. Ethan stood by the door with the box of diapers in his hands. The rain fell steady outside, tapping on the glass like a quiet drum. The woman in the gray coat was already walking away. He wanted to call out to her, to thank her again, but his voice stayed trapped in his throat. People did not usually help strangers in this world. It felt unreal. He pushed the box of diapers closer to his chest, trying to understand what had just happened. The store lights flickered above him, and for a moment he felt lighter, though nothing in his life had changed except this one small act of kindness. When he stepped out of the store, the cool air hit him. He looked around the parking lot and saw the woman standing by a dark blue car. She held her umbrella, but did not open it. Instead, she looked up at the sky for a moment before getting inside. Ethan started walking toward home, keeping the box dry under his jacket. Every raindrop that hit his face felt cold, but inside he was warm in a way that surprised him. His mind replayed the sound of her voice. It was calm, respectful, and kind. Those three things rarely came together in his world. At his small apartment, Lily was asleep, wrapped in a blanket on the couch. He changed her into a fresh diaper, kissed her forehead, and sat beside her. The box from the store stood on the floor like a quiet reminder of something good that did not have to happen but did. He placed the small store receipt beside it and noticed that the woman had written something at the bottom in neat handwriting. It was her name and a phone number under it. Claire Donovan. He did not know the name, except that it sounded like someone important. He wondered why she had given it to him. Maybe she thought he might pay her back one day, but the way she had spoken told him this was not a loan. It was something else. A gift from one lonely soul to another. No. The next morning, Ethan woke before the sun. He dressed quickly for his early shift at the repair shop. Life had its old rhythm again, but carried a new tone under it. While pouring his coffee, he glanced once more at that receipt and smiled softly. Something urged him to call or at least send a message. He wanted to thank her properly. After a long day covered in oil and metal dust, he decided to do something he would never have done before. He stopped by a small coffee shop near the downtown offices, a place he could never afford to eat in, but that felt right for some reason. Claire sat by the window with her laptop open, a cup of coffee untouched beside her. She had been staring at a column of numbers for the last 15 minutes without really seeing them. Her days were lines of meetings, signatures, and screen light. People spoke to her in polite voices and smiled at her because they had to, not because they wanted to. Being powerful did not make her feel alive. It made her feel far away from everyone else. Yet for some reason, last night kept pulling at her thoughts. The man with the warm eyes and the tired hands. She had not meant to give him her number at first. It had just felt like the right thing to do. Maybe she hoped he would not call. Maybe she hoped he would. When the bell above the coffee shop door rang, she looked up by chance. Ethan stood at the entrance, holding a small paper cup in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. He looked uncertain, almost shy. For a second, Claire thought she might look away, keep to her world of spreadsheets and comfort, but she did not. Instead, she waved him over with a small smile that felt surprisingly natural. He walked slowly toward her table, the noise of the cafe fading behind him. He spoke first, thanked her again for what she had done, and said he did not know how to repay her. She told him there was nothing to repay. She said she only did what anyone should do. Yet deep down, they both knew most people would not have done it. They began to talk, not about business or struggle, but about simple things. He spoke of Lily, her laugh, and how she liked to grab his hair. Claire listened, smiling in ways she had not smiled for years. She told him that she had no children, no husband, that her whole life had become a list of achievements without any meaning behind them. Her words came out slower, softer, as if she surprised herself. The soft background music mixed with the smell of coffee and rain that drifted in from the cracked window. Hours seemed to slip by unnoticed. Ethan's laughter came easily when she made a small joke about how she was terrible at cooking. The people around them faded away. Both of them felt something quietly building. Not love yet, but a sense of being seen. When Ethan finally stood to leave, she told him he could call again sometime. He nodded before walking into the street. As he disappeared into the afternoon light, Claire felt something loosen in her chest. She realized she was smiling for no reason at all, and that some part of her life had just changed forever. The morning sun warmed the city streets as people hurried to work, cars honking and voices mixing in the air. Ethan pushed Lily's stroller along the sidewalk, the box of tools strapped to his back for another day at the repair shop. His thoughts were still on Claire. He had spoken to her twice since that coffee shop meeting. Their conversations were short, but full of a quiet comfort he had not felt in a long time. They spoke about small daily things, told her about Lily learning to crawl faster, and about the old car he was fixing at the shop. She told him about the meetings that drained her and the silence of her big house. The connection was simple and honest. It made him want to see her again, even if he did not fully understand why. Claire sat at her office desk, staring out the tall window at the city below. Papers and screens covered her desk, full of numbers, plans, and contracts waiting for her signature. Yet her mind was somewhere else. Her assistant spoke to her, but she did not hear half of what was said. Since that rainy evening and the coffee that followed, she found herself distracted more often. It surprised her because she was not a woman who allowed herself to drift. She had built her company from nothing and had learned to guard her time. But thoughts of Ethan always slipped through the cracks, softening her rigid days. There was something about him that pulled her closer without asking for anything. He seemed lost and strong at the same time, broken but full of quiet love for the tiny life he cared for so dearly. That afternoon, she sent a message asking if he could meet her at the park. She felt silly doing it because she rarely asked anyone for time. He replied that he would bring Lily after his shift. At 5, the sky glowed with the colors of early sunset. Claire sat on a bench, waiting, pretending to check her phone while truly watching the children play. She had not been to a park in years. The laughter of children filled the air, and something in her chest tightened, with both warmth and fear. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared, pushing the stroller across the path. His hair was messy from work, his shirt a little stained, but his smile was tired and real. Lily sat up in her stroller, her tiny hands reaching toward the air. Ethan greeted her with a simple hello, his voice carrying that same kind tone she remembered. He felt unsure standing beside her, like he did not belong in her world but dared to stay anyway. Claire leaned forward and looked at Lily, who studied her with wide, curious eyes. Claire reached out a hand, and the baby grabbed one of her fingers, squeezing tightly. That small touch made Claire's eyes glisten for a second. She laughed quietly and said Lily was strong. Ethan smiled and said she took after her mother. There was a pause between them, soft but full. Claire asked about his wife, and Ethan spoke quietly about the accident. His eyes went to the sky as if the words were heavy but needed to be said. Told her that losing his wife had been like losing color from the world. Every day had become gray. He worked, he cared for Lily, and he tried not to collapse under the weight of it all. As he spoke, Claire listened in silence. She had read stories and heard people talk about loss, but hearing it from him felt different. It was real and raw. In his voice she heard the strength of someone who kept moving even when everything was falling apart. Claire looked at him and saw not a man to pity but a man to admire. They spent the rest of the evening walking along the park path. Claire pushed Lily's stroller for part of the way, and Ethan walked beside her. They spoke about their favorite movies, about childhood memories, about food that reminded them of home. For a while, the walls between their worlds disappeared. When Lily started to fuss, Ethan picked her up and gently rocked her. The baby's small laugh made Claire's lips curve into another smile. She took out her phone and snapped a photo without thinking. That small moment of laughter felt precious, something she wanted to remember. As the sky darkened, Claire realized how long they had been there. She offered him a ride home. Ethan tried to refuse, saying he could walk, but she encouraged him gently until he agreed. The drive was quiet, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet. The streetlights cast soft light inside the car, and the sound of rain beginning again filled the silence between them. When they reached his street, Ethan pointed out his small apartment building. Claire parked nearby and turned toward him. Something in her wanted to say that she enjoyed the night, but her words caught in her throat. Before she could find them, Ethan thanked her for the evening and for letting Lily laugh again. He said that it meant more than she could imagine. She watched him carry Lily into the building, the door closing softly behind him. For a while she stayed parked by the curb, staring at the raindrops running down her windshield. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, her heart stirring with confusion and warmth. It had been many years since she had felt a pull like this. By the time she finally started the engine, she knew this was no ordinary friendship. Something deeper was stirring between them, quiet but unstoppable, like the steady heartbeat of the city at night. Days passed and a new rhythm began to shape their lives. Ethan worked at the repair shop from early morning until late afternoon, while Claire handled meetings, phone calls, and endless decisions at her office. Their worlds were still far apart, but each day they found small reasons to connect. A quick message during lunch, a picture of Lily smiling, or a call after work made both of them feel lighter. It was as if their hearts had found a silent place between two different worlds where they could rest. One Saturday morning, Ethan decided to fix the faucet in his small kitchen. He was halfway through the job when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. She asked if he and Lily wanted to join her for a picnic at the park by the river. Ethan looked around his small apartment and smiled. He had not been invited to anything like that in a long time, replied yes, and began packing a small bag with Lily's toys and a blanket. He did not have fancy food to bring, just some sandwiches, apples, and a bottle of milk for the baby, but that was enough. When they arrived, Claire was already there. She sat on a checkered blanket with a basket beside her. She looked different that day, less like a business leader and more like someone simply enjoying the morning. The sunlight touched her hair, and she smiled when she saw them. Lily reached her arms toward her as if she remembered her right away. Claire laughed and took the baby into her arms, spinning her gently until Lily giggled. Ethan watched them with quiet amazement. He had never seen Claire look so alive. They ate and talked while Lily crawled on the blanket, pulling at the grass. Claire told Ethan stories about growing up in a small town where her family owned a bakery. She missed the smell of fresh bread and the sound of her father's laughter in the mornings. Ethan told her about his dream of one day opening his own small repair shop. He said he wanted to build something lasting, something that Lily could one day be proud of. Claire listened closely, admiring the way he spoke. His words were simple but honest, and it made her wish she could see the world as he did. As the afternoon sun began to fade, a light wind swept through the park. Claire leaned back on her hands, looking at the sky. For a moment, everything felt calm. The noise of the city seemed far away. Ethan spread another blanket over Lily as she fell asleep. Her tiny fingers still curled around her toy giraffe. Claire turned to him and said quietly that she had forgotten what peace felt like. Glanced at her and said that sometimes peace hides in small moments when we stop chasing big things. She held his gaze longer than she meant to, and something unspoken passed between them. Not far away, a few people watched them from a distance. One of them recognized Claire from a newspaper article. The well-dressed woman sitting on the grass was no ordinary person. She was the head of a major tech company. Phones clicked quietly, photos snapped, and whispers began to spread. Claire did not notice at first. She was laughing as Ethan told her about a customer who once tried to fix a tire with tape. When she finally caught sight of someone staring, she felt a small tug of unease in her stomach, but pushed the thought aside. She was tired of caring about appearances, at least for today. After the picnic, Claire offered to drive them home again. Ethan accepted, knowing Lily was getting sleepy. The drive was slow, filled with streetlights and the soft hum of the radio. Claire asked about his next work project, and he asked how she handled so many employees. They talked like old friends, their voices easy and real. When they reached his building, Lily was already asleep in her car seat. Ethan lifted her gently, careful not to wake her. Claire looked at them through the open window, her heart swelling with something she did not want to name. When he thanked her for the day, she told him she should be the one thanking him. She said that it had been a long time since she laughed and meant it. He smiled and said that laughter was free, and that made it the best gift. She watched him walk away, the child in his arms, until he disappeared inside. Now the night air smelled of rain, and city lights glowed against the dark sky. The next morning, Claire walked into her office with a small smile still on her face. Her assistant noticed it and raised an eyebrow. Claire shook her head and got to work, trying not to think of Ethan. But his words about small moments stayed with her. She realized that for the first time in many years, her life was beginning to feel like her own. Across town, Ethan fixed cars while humming a tune Lily liked. He thought about Claire often that day and hoped she was doing all right in her world of meetings and pressure. They were two people from different sides of life, yet something invisible was pulling them together. Each kindness, each laugh, each quiet exchange stitched their worlds closer, line by line. Like soft thread weaving to lonely hearts into one story that neither of them had planned to write. The week after the picnic, things began to change in ways Ethan did not expect. He noticed that Claire had become quieter in her messages. Where she once replied quickly, now there were longer pauses. He tried not to think too much of it, believing she was just busy with work. He kept sending her photos of Lily, who had started trying to stand on her own. Each little smile from his daughter kept him moving even on the hardest days, but deep down he missed the sound of Claire's voice. In her downtown office, Claire sat through yet another long meeting. Her board members were talking about investors and public image. The topic of her recent charitable visits came up, and someone mentioned her being seen at a park with a man and a baby. A photo had been shared in a business blog, followed by whispers among other executives. One of her senior investors suggested that she should be more careful, that her reputation was too valuable to risk being linked with someone who did not fit her world. The words stung. The idea of Ethan and Lily being spoken of as mistakes made her blood run cold. For hours after the meeting, she could not focus. She stared at her computer, reading the same sentence over and over. The city lights shimmered outside her window, but none of them comforted her like they once did. She thought of Ethan's hands covered in grease, his gentle patience with Lily, and how peaceful she had felt sitting with him under the sun. Yet doubt began to creep in. She knew the cruel way her world worked, how people judged without mercy. She told herself to protect what she had built, to stay cautious. But every time she remembered his smile, she felt her resolve weaken. 2 days later, a black car pulled into the repair shop's parking lot. Ethan was under the hood of an old truck when he saw Claire step out. She looked different, tense, her eyes shadowed with worry. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward her, his heart quickening. She started by saying they needed to talk. Could tell this was not a casual visit. They sat on a wooden bench outside the shop, the air thick with the smell of motor oil and wind. Claire told him that people were talking, that someone had taken photos of them. Her tone was calm, but the unease in her voice was clear. She said she had to think about her company, her position, and everything that depended on her decisions. Ethan listened quietly, his pulse steady at first and then heavy. He nodded slowly, trying to hide the hurt that burned inside his chest. He understood her world was built on strict walls. Still, it felt like someone had pulled the ground from under him. He asked her if this meant goodbye. She looked away before answering. She said she did not want to let anyone control her heart, but she also could not risk everything she had worked for. Her words were careful, but her eyes trembled with something deeper than business fear. Ethan stood up and took a breath. He told her that he would never want to make her choose, said that he had survived too many losses to stand in the way of someone else's peace. Then he thanked her, not out of anger, but out of respect. He thanked her for showing him that kindness and love still existed in the world. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small photo she had taken of Lily laughing at the park. He handed it to her and said it belonged with her now. When she tried to speak, he smiled softly and said that sometimes life only gives us short chapters, and it is enough to be thankful for the story itself. Then Ethan turned and walked back into the shop, his shoulders heavy but proud. That night, Claire sat in her car outside his building, watching the windows glow faintly. She saw a shadow move across the curtain, a small figure bouncing in someone's arms. Her throat tightened. She wanted to step out, to knock on his door and tell him that the world could say what it wanted, but her courage failed her. The image of him standing alone by the shop replayed in her mind. By the time she drove away, she was crying silently. It was not the kind of crying that came from weakness, but from knowing she had traded peace for pride. Inside his apartment, Ethan laid Lily in her crib and sat by the window. The quiet hum of the city filled the room. He looked at the old photo on the wall of his wife and whispered softly that he had tried to believe again. For a long time, he stared into the night without moving. Yet even in the silence, his heart refused to become bitter. He knew he had done the right thing by letting her go. Outside, rain began to fall again, washing the streets clean. In its rhythm, he found a strange calm, as if the world was reminding him that love, no matter how brief, still leaves behind light strong enough to keep walking forward.